All right, here's the premise. As you all know, multimedia, all encompassing mega pop stars have existed since pre World War II times, with singers and musicians appearing anywhere from movies to TV shows to commercial advertisements, and in the process, becoming pop culture idols in the process. It's a lineage that goes back from Frank Sinatra to Elvis Presley to the Beatles to the Monkees and the Partridge Family, I guess. Anyway, however, the template for the modern day pop star slash icon slash idol, the rich and over the top and androgyny, glamour, vanity, and shameless self promotion. That was arguably established in that oh so decadent decade of the 1980s. The holy trinity of this popapalooza, if you will, were inarguably Michael Jackson, Prince, and Madonna. Now, while the lovely Miss Ciccone deserves every bit of the legacy enhancing accolades and respect that has come her way, including her place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, she has really never received the sheer unbridled reverence for her craft, her art, and her musicianship that the former two have received and continue to receive after their respective deaths. Maybe it's because she's a woman in a historically sexist industry. Maybe it's because none of her studio albums have garnered neither timeless respect from critics, nor passionate love from music obsessives, nor that talismanic tag of quote unquote influential from music peers. In any case, it's the two African American males in that 80s trinity that are generally regarded as the musical groundbreakers and innovators who, before hip hop exploded in the second half of the 1980s, took quote unquote black music, R&B, soul, funk, the leftover remains of disco, to a stratosphere of unseen commercial heights, musical inventiveness, and overall artistic sophistication that continue to influence and resonate to this day. While Madonna's pop culture zeitgeist making ranks right up there with Michael and Prince, what the latter two did musically established them as the twin towers of 1980s pop music. It didn't hurt that a little thing called MTV was around to beam their art and music to everywhere in the known globe. Now, many years ago, the comedian Chris Rock had a really good stand-up bit about young black music fans growing up in the 1980s. According to him, back then, you were either a Prince guy, quote unquote, or a Michael guy. And with the immense and unfathomable success of Thriller, Michael may have won the battle, but in the long run, Prince won the war. At least that is what Mr. Rock established. Well, years later, the Curmudgeons will take up Mr. Rock's premise and produce a very special, ongoing miniseries that we have humbly titled Prince versus Michael Jackson, of which this will be Chapter 1. Now, here's the premise. Chris is a massive Michael Jackson fan. I, on the other hand, find it unfathomable that anyone would think Michael is musically, artistically, instrumentally, lyrically, melodically, or in any other way better than Prince, who is undoubtedly one of the most singularly talented American musical geniuses of the 20th century, whose place is, in my opinion, comfortably alongside Miles Davis, James Brown, George Clinton, John Coltrane, and Chuck Berry, to name a few. Each episode of this little mini-series, not really little, it's pretty big, will proceed chronologically as a period of time is carved out and both artists' musical development is analyzed, described, compared, and contrasted. What's most striking about this endeavor is how both of these guys' careers and lives paralleled each other so uncannily from the beginning. Both were from the Midwest. Both grew up in troubled families. Both grew up listening to and loving the same music, although I'm not so sure Michael was as well versed in P-Funk as Prince was. Both started to achieve solo success around the same time. Both had their biggest artistic achievements at the same time. Both started to commercially and artistically tail off at the same time. Both developed hardcore pill addictions in their middle age, and both died of heart failure. So, we hope you will all enjoy as we delve into Chapter 1 of this surgical breakdown of these behemoths of not just Black American music, but pop culture in general. On this episode, we will navigate the period of 1975 to 81. For Michael, it's him taking charge of the Jackson 5 / the Jacksons, then slowly weaning himself off of them and culminating in his disco funk classic album Off the Wall. For Prince, it's his beginnings in the Minneapolis R&B club scene and culminating in the 1-2 electro funk landmarks of Dirty Mind and Controversy. Don't stop till you get enough of this, baby.
The Curmudgeon Rock Report. Curmudgeon rhymes with bludgeon. Rock gods do it right. So do rock nerds. We're here for the rock. 1965, 2021, doesn't matter. Crude, rude, yet somehow sophisticated. Welcome. Enjoy the show.
I'm Christopher O'Connor. He's Arturo Andrade, and welcome to something we've been looking forward to for a long time now. This is about 3 months in the works. Prince versus Michael. Two icons you know well, or at least you think you know well. And we've got a traditional divide between us, which we will get into. So this will be in the spirit of barroom ball busting and light combat. And so we hope that you enjoy what we have here. Arturo, what's on your mind and what's been going on, dude?
It's summer, it's hot, and we're going to be hot and get hot at each other in this. Well, maybe not that hot at each other, but we're going to get a bit hot emotion-wise for this episode.
Yeah,
We clearly have our favorites, and
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
other reasons. I have other, not just Prince and Michael. I have another reason to get hot and bothered and get curmudgeonly. But we'll get to that soon.
Yeah, Arturo's in a bad mood, which makes for a great listen. Welcome to the Parallel Universe. This is our every episode foray into a netherworld and into an outer space that we like to contemplate. What if rock and roll and the best music still mattered, still got distributed, and you could still fill stadiums with music that was actually awesome and mattered? And so this is our usual trip through that. Although this week is a little bit skewed. It's even in a parallel universe, there are forces that push back. There are forces of tumult, and there's plenty of reasons to be curmudgeonly. And so with that, I will kick it over to Mr. Grumpy here, Arturo Andrade.
Yeah. We normally use this parallel universe segment to praise a new album by a band or artist that we like. For this episode segment, I want to do the opposite. I'm going to seriously take a shit on the new album by a band that I like, that I normally like, and then extrapolate that to a greater issue that has me wanting to get my curmudgeonly bitch on. Okay? Now, generally speaking, I'm a fan of Wolf Alice, the British band Wolf Alice, and their usual mix of revved up punk rock, shoegazer rock, indie pop, and arena ready alternative rock. Excuse me. I think their previous album, Visions of a Life from 2017, is actually one of the best albums of the last decade. I love that album. But this new album that just came out recently, Blue Weekend it's called, to me is an atrocity of continuously slow, mellowed out, ethereal slop. Okay? Tight songwriting is something that this band showed continued improvement on from the first album onward. But man, have they abandoned that in favor of blissed out, airy fairy, light as a feather indie pop. This album is a fucking drag to listen to from start to finish, with only a couple of tracks spread throughout that recall the pop rock smarts and hooks of their previous work. Instead of using the coronavirus lockdown to come up with something original and inspired, Ellie Rousel and her band sound like they're happy to just mail it in. And the music critic cognoscenti that usually kisses their collective ass will lap it up. Well, that's exactly what's happened. And this leads me to what really pisses me off. Okay, according to Metacritic.com, this new Wolf Alice album is the best reviewed album of the year so far.
And
yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt, but
all right.
So with Metacritic, to give context, you always got to look at the number of reviews, and chances are the lower the number, the more British. But so what's the number of reviews that this is based on?
Well, I'm going to tell you right now. So far, it has the highest aggregate score that can be given after reviews have been tallied. Here's the thing, and I looked it up. The vast majority of the reviews that have been entered for Wolf Alice have come from decidedly non-muso or non-music-centered British media outlets.
There you go.
Like The Guardian, The Independent, the Daily Telegraph, and of course the rotting digital corpse of the NME. Mojo, on the other hand, the real music Bible for music nerds like us, gave the album a solid 4-star review, but didn't really describe it as anything special. It didn't even give it one of their lead reviews. So why is an album that is so stale, so limp, so uninspired, so boring, and so lacking in any kind of creativity and energy, why does it garner such high praise? Listen, maybe it's my old age driving me to say this, but I felt this way for almost a decade now. Are you ready for this, Chris? The current younger generation of music critics, in my opinion, have the most disastrously bland taste in music of any music critic generation since the pre-rock and roll era.
Yeah, I may actually agree with that. Plus, they also can't write, or they If it's not beholding the power of the first draft, then I would be very, very afraid.
Yeah. I mean, the millennial generation have been shit on for various reasons throughout the years, and I'm not normally the kind of person who does this kind of shitting. However, I make an exception here in this area. This new generation of music critics have tastes that are so wussy, so bland, so lacking in any kind of edge or countercultural element. And when I say counterculture, I don't mean hippies or politics. I mean going against the grain of conventional society, not being so conformist. You know, it's interesting. I've met and have had conversations with plenty of people born in the 1980s and early 90s. Many of them are some of the most progressive minded people I've ever met when it comes to political or social issues. But when it comes to music and what they listen to, many of them are so freaking conservative. And when I say conservative, I don't mean old fashioned. I mean mainstream, streamlined, safe, conformist. And if I can use an old hipster jargon, square. They're so square in their taste of music. They're progressive in their politics, progressive in their social issues, but they like the most conventional, streamlined pop shit. There's no edge to their freaking musical tastes. And this carries over to the new generation of music critics. I really hope the so-called Gen Z, the generation after the millennials, I really hope they have some edge to them and their musical tastes that are a little more dangerous, a little weirder, a little stranger, and a little edgier. Okay, my rant's over. Chris, on to you.
You're dead on about the new critics is that they, well, me as a professional writer, I mean, I it just bugs me that they write so crappily and so, like beamingly, or they have this weird bendy syntax with all these adjectives, and it just drips the saccharin. But it's worth mentioning that the godfather for a lot of these guys is probably Rob Sheffield of Rolling Stone fame, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, I hate to say that because Rob is a very good writer, and he's written some wonderful books. He's got a book called Dreaming the Beatles, which is one of the best musical historical analyses combined with memoir I've ever read. However, Sheffield's made a career lately of gushing over the female pop starlets like Taylor Swift and now Olivia Rodrigo in a way that's almost embarrassingly fanboy, like he's the president of the fan club of Sean Cassidy.
Jesus Christ.
Or it almost has that kind of air to it. So
I've always thought Rob Sheffield had shitty taste in music as well.
yeah, well,
He's another one.
he does and he doesn't because he's an REM acolyte. But yeah, it's
We need
strange.
to listen to REM again.
Yeah, I mean, as he gets older, maybe there's a desire to stay contemporary, which, as the music is not as good, makes it kind of embarrassing. But yeah, it's just kind of funny. We're in the parallel universe to take a shit, so it's kind of an interesting dynamic. Okay, so for my selection this week, this may seem like damning with faint praise, but this actually is a very compelling record, worth listening to, and probably deserves repeat listens because the shtick here, there's a lot to miss on first listen or on first examination. This is Dry Cleaning's New Long Leg. So, on Dry Cleaning's new album, New Long Leg, vocalist Florence Shaw offers a thought that might as well summarize this album. Emo dead stuff collector. Things come to brain. Spent 17 pounds on mushrooms for you, 'cause I'm silly. I call Shaw a vocalist rather than a singer. She's not a singer. She doesn't even try to sing. She doesn't even try to do the traditional spoken word thing in an orthodox sense. She just talks. She talks in a deep voice with a deeply British accent that sounds like she smoked a pack of cigarettes a day for 10 years. And throughout the course of 10 songs in 42 minutes, She expresses thoughts and ideas that might as well be inspired by a dose of 17 pounds of mushrooms. Strangely enough, however, this works because the band behind her, the musical douse behind Shaw's considerably dry cleaning here, is quite compelling and quite good. It plays like a psychedelic tour through the last 40 years of British rock, though Johnny Marr is a clear influence. The musical accompaniment here is a series of melodic, jangly tunes that seem to beg for an emotive singer in the vein of Shawn Ryder of the Happy Mondays or Harriet Wheeler of the Sundays. Instead, these tracks get a striking juxtaposition. Buggy conversations from an artist who may not actually know what day of the week it is. This is meant to be more of a compliment than that descriptor suggests. New Long Leg just works and is pretty original in its work ultimately. Some might accuse Shaw of ripping off Kim Gordon. The only difference here, though, is that Gordon was much more of a yeller whose musing seemed designed to serve as more of an instrument.
And Kim Gordon had talent.
In your opinion, this girl's got an interesting shtick, and I guess she's got that beatnik poet in her. But anyway, Gordon was not an anchor in a tidal wave, which is what Shaw seems to serve as here. Granted, it's a pretty out there anchor. I'll let Pitchfork chime in, quoting from a decidedly pitchforkish voice, but somehow managing to capture Shaw's thing very, very well. Quoting, "On headphones, there's something almost ASMR-like about it, and not strictly in the textural way of recent pop production. Shaw is right in your ear, not with a flummoxing sound clip, but a picture you've never seen. The photographer looking at the literal junk in the margins." Sorry, I got to pop up here. Rather than the hero at the center, and locating a deeper truth. Unlike the distant cool of Kim Gordon's songs with Sonic Youth, Shaw appears intimate and almost mystical, like she's guiding a meditation class through the detritus of the mind. Speaking of which, here's my personal favorite detritus from Shaw. Anyway, mystical Shakespeare shoes, a trapped person screaming. The last thing I looked at in this hand mirror was a human asshole. Well, Helen's situation has really put all that in the shade now. There he goes, he doesn't care. Mostly angry, scrappy songs. And where does that romantic jealousy come from? Te amo, Manuel. Married then. Her hippo. Every day he's a dick. Yep, hippos can be dicks in the brand of the world that dry cleaning creates here on New Long Leg. Check it out. It's an oddly hypnotic ride through the slop of the mind.
Many years have passed, but you're still charming. Rose falling and exploding. You can't save the world on your own, I guess. Don't send me it. You keep it. You keep it.
Yeah, I would like this band a lot more if they were an instrumental band. I think her vocals are the worst part of the group. To me, it's just pretentious indie hipster gibberish, and it's just one non sequitur after another. I think it just drags it down. The band behind her is pretty good. You know, they're a groovy rock band. It's indie rock with shades of psychedelia, shades of grunge here and there. But they're good. They're a good band. They just either need to have a singer who has passion and has lyricism and can sing, or just be an instrumental band like Lightning Bolt. And screw it. That's why. I mean, I can't really recommend this album because it's just she takes away so much from this band. I don't think she adds anything to it. And yeah, this is just a band that I think I really would either become instrumental or do something to change up, or kick her out of the group, or have her learn how to sing a freaking song and have some lyrics that actually have depth to them.
let us get into a very exciting exercise for us: Prince versus Michael. Both of these guys. I mean, this is kind of like uh, the old Beatles and Stones record. There's really no wrong answer. However, uh, I am a Michael guy, in which I'll get into for a little bit, and I'll admit a lot of that has to do with my upbringing, and there's a subjective reverence there. But I also do believe that, look, Prince has the volume, but I also think that Michael Jackson's records, uh, starting with Off the Wall, and he had 3 or 4 albums that are just astonishing and are just basically perfect and revolutionized everything that came after them. And I just think that, Prince, yes, he did have 3 or 4 perfect records, but he also had a lot of stuff that, while admirable, was sort of put out there to be put out there.
So did Michael, but by the time he got older.
Yeah, well, but not quite as much. I mean, he
Well, he
kept
wasn't
putting.
as prolific, yeah.
Yeah, he's nowhere near as prolific, and obviously there were diminishing returns as he faded into drug addiction, depression, and had all of his legal troubles. Although there are a couple of kick-ass songs on "Blood on the Dance Floor," his disco record there from the late '90s. Uh, but anyway, so I'm gonna defend Michael as a talent, as an icon, and as one of my, and I know this sounds creepy, but one of my heroes. And so I'm really looking forward to this. I'll be a counterpuncher because I know you're going to come on nastily. And
Not as much as you think. Not as much as you think. Because when I start talking about Prince, I'm focusing on Prince.
yeah, no, no,
I'm gonna make I'll make a few snide Michael comments while I'm talking about Prince, but not that much. I'm
okay,
gonna keep it mostly Prince.
yeah, and oh, trust me, I'll be snide as well. But yeah, I said this will be fun. We're taking the positions here, and it's reverence, but it's also thoughtfulness
Yeah.
coming from here. So
Yeah.
really, really looking forward to this, and so uh, we might as well get into this. The Curmudgeon Rock Report isn't actually brought to you by Zencaster, but it would probably suck a whole lot more if we didn't use this excellent podcasting service. Arturo lives in South Korea. Chris lives in Texas. We needed audio recording software that could record both of our voices natively, securely, cleanly, and professionally. We wanted to avoid Zoom like we would avoid Ed Sheeran. Zcaster made that possible. With Zencastr, we each use one track to capture our vocals through our computers. Then we upload the individual tracks into Zencastr's built-in post-production engine. Finally, we export the combined, smooth track out to finish editing each episode. Zencastr works awesomely well for recording your interviews with guests too. So visit Zencastr.com now and start doing your remote audio way better today.
All right, Chris. We'll start with you and your love affair with the pedophile. Let's start.
Wow, that is quite the image, especially since I'm talking about Michael from the age of 6 on. That's folks. We are not sponsored by NAMBLA. I assure you that. And if you have any objections, curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. Now, that said, Michael and Prince very much lived and had parallel experiences. You had prodigies growing up in the Midwest. Really, I think Minneapolis and Chicago are only like 400 miles away from each other. So, same region, black kids, middle class kids from the Midwest who had all that talent. Here's the difference. Michael was part of 2 machines. Prince was always kind of his own
Yeah.
magnificent Loch Ness monster creature.
Right. Yeah.
And I guess you could say that about Michael, but Michael was stuck in 2 machines. There was the family business. He was one of 10 children born in August of 1958. The family grew up in Gary, Indiana. You had the patriarch, Joe Jackson, who, as we've learned from multiple accounts from his wife, from Michael, and from some of the siblings, was pretty much a monster. Maybe
Yeah.
not Murray Wilson, but pretty close. And he saw the talent that his kids had, especially Michael, even from an early age. I mean, he could belt. And so starting when Michael is 6, we have this, he gets inserted into a band that already included several of his brothers. They start playing around the Midwest, and within a few years, they quickly catch on. And they find their way into the second machine, which was Berry Gordy's Motown factory. And, Berry Gordy is one of the great, most important figures in the history of American popular music from the late 1950s on. He invented a blueprint for black R&B popular music that was radio friendly
Yeah.
and charismatic. And he also, obviously had that bullpen of songwriters, which, say what you want about the limitations on the artist, but guys like Holland, Dozier, and Holland and Norman Whitfield were damn good songwriters. That said, they find themselves in the machine. Michael is this 11, 12-year-old. It really starts when he's 11, wonderkind.
I have a
Just
question. I have a question about that wonderkind status. At what question number one? At what point do you think Michael's siblings realized that Michael was not only the most talented member of the group, but by far the most talented and maybe the only talented one? And question number two, how do you think they reacted to that at first?
my speculation on that is when he was 6 and they started playing out in public and he joined the band. They were like, oh shit, that kid can sing. He's charismatic as hell. He can
You can
dance. I
dance.
mean,
Yeah.
he's button cute. And I think at first you got to believe that the family was like, oh shit, that's our meal ticket. That maybe Joe Jackson, even though he's whipping us with belts and verbally abusing us and calling us ugly and giving us lifelong scars, mentally and otherwise, he's also got the weapon that's going to make us all famous and at least bring in some money for the family. So I got to believe at first they were like, "Oh, okay, this is great. We'll do our thing as a band because we know we're tight, and we'll go with this, and we'll let Michael do his thing, and it'll take us to glory." And it did.
Okay.
So
I'm curious the dynamic there. Like you have one guy who's one kid really who's so astronomically talented, and all the other brothers are like, take him or leave him.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, look, with the exception of Jermaine, by the mid to late 70s, they were all off the grid. Michael was taking off, and by then they were all resentful, but they spent 30 something years, or about 30 years, looking for handouts, and they're still looking for handouts.
Yeah.
I've read that Katherine Jackson and her estate, they really kind of have to beat these folks off with an ugly stick because they come around. And even Janet, because Janet made some pretty good money. That
Yeah.
like Michael's estate and Janet have spent years having to say no to their brothers and sisters, looking for loans.
And there's the other one. Janet is like little Janet, by far the youngest, and she's like the second most talented member of the family.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so the kids, like the youngest boy and the youngest girl end up being the most talented. Now, don't discount Jermaine. Jermaine did some great stuff in the mid 70s, some really great disco instrumental stuff. And then of course in the early 80s, I think he probably was quicker to the facelift than Michael. I think Jermaine was looking like he was something out of a wax museum by 1983, more than Michael. But be that as it may, yes. So I think they all saw their meal ticket and they wrote it. Obviously, Berry Gordy, and his scouting folks who just knew talent when they saw it and collected it up, they brought them into the machine. And so, so Michael from 11 years old is a star and a bright shining star. And so this launches one of the great uh, streaks in the history of pop music by any one artist, being the Jackson 5.
Right.
They straddle 1970 and 71 with a couple of albums, and it's one huge iconic pop hit after another. Uh, thank goodness for orange juice commercials, because it's probably made some of these Motown guys and the Michael estate, and or at least the songwriters, a shitload of money in the 50 years since. The Love You Save, ABC, otherwise known as OPP, I Want You Back, Never Can Say Goodbye, I'll
Yeah.
Be There, and a few other minor ones. But you can see that, and I think that most of our folks, there's a few images that are burned in our brains of Michael. One of them is him in those wild shorts and the powder blue pants and the hats, doing the little moves on stage. And here you have this little kid with this enormously expressive falsetto, even at 11. But it was more sort of a less artistic singing and more orthodox, like I'm gifted like Frank Sinatra was gifted as an 11-year-old kid. So he's at that point he's playing it straight, but he's playing it straight almost as well as anybody that age ever, I would say at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and they knew what they had, for sure. And so while the Jackson 5 is going through their records, they had the animated show and they did all of the kiddie stuff. They're turning Michael into a preteen and then young teen idol. And from that, you get 4 solo records, which for the most part are terrible. Uh, uh, Got to Be There, Ben, Music and Me, and then Forever Michael, which comes out when Michael is 16 going on 17. So that's true.
Ben is truly awful.
Yeah, well, Ben, the song, I mean, look, it's about a boy and his rat that was attached to a movie of the same name. I mean, look, there's probably only like one kid on the planet that could have made that meaningful and took it to near the top of the charts, and that was Michael. Anybody else, you would have been like, this is ridiculous. In Michael's hands, you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's some conviction. And I'm saying, and that's one thing about Michael that I should say here. He had a real gift for emulating artists that he liked, then interpreting that artist's work in a stunningly original way, and then going further and splicing those influences and interpretations into an explosion of creativity and self-expression no one had ever heard before. And even at this point, he's doing it very subtly as a child and teen vocalist. I mean, he's still stuck in the machine, but he's finding ways to figure out how to do this. I mean, even with like Dancing Machine, because
That's a great song.
oh, it's a great song. But even that, I mean, pretty much Michael. I mean, if anybody popularized the robot, it was him. That's another iconic image is of him and Cher doing the robot together, or her doing a dance routine with the Jacksons. I mean, say what you want about Tito, Marlon, Jermaine, Randy, and all those guys, but yeah, they could all dance. I'll give them that. Or at least they could follow the same steps and let Michael be the star. I mean, they couldn't do the spin. Michael, even when he was 16, could do the spin. So, and he had it. And people also don't remember, like during this teen idol phase, even though he's stuck in the machine and pretty much hates it, he played the teen idol part really, really well. He's a good looking guy. Yeah, he had one of the best afros that ever walked the face of the earth. He wore the suits really well, and he just had that charisma.
Which makes all those future plastic surgeries such a shame.
Oh, I know. I mean, it's who understands that body dysmorphia shit. I don't understand it, but I guess we can get into that here. That Michael had a lifelong unhealthy obsession with his nose, which biographers and journalists have traced to Joe Jackson goofing on him having this wide, too African-looking nose. Which, look, I mean, no big deal. I mean, he was a handsome guy, but he had this thing. And then, of course, in 1979, in the middle of a routine of some kind, he breaks his nose.
Mm.
And therein is his introduction to rhinoplasty,
Ugh.
and
And it's
which,
all downhill from there.
yeah, pretty much by the end of his life, no joke, he actually had to wear a prosthetic tip to his nose because, well, there's speculation. He always said he only had like 2 or 3 nose jobs, but
Bullshit.
probably bullshit. But my old friend Brian Hyatt wrote an extraordinary article after his death that talked about this history. There is a plausibility to it because you have a couple of nose jobs. Uh, the cartilage can break down. I mean, this has happened to some people where they basically lose most of their nose because of a malpractice rhinoplasty. And so it is plausible that he had 2 or 3, but that his nose spent uh, uh, 25 years just disintegrating. Uh,
Mm.
Me personally, I think that's bullshit. I think that, yeah, he did have an unhealthy plastic surgery addiction, and it's really too bad. But at this point, this is all the stuff that makes me defend Michael. It's the charisma, it's the performance, but it's also just the musical genius. Which again, I think because of the pop machinery, because of the teeny bopper media, because of the growth of music video. I mean, you've seen the video for Dancing Machine, right?
Sure, yeah.
Which is just silly. I mean, with the outer space motif and and then just that image of them performing on stage, but they all look like they're like psychedelic, like traces. It's completely ridiculous, but it's great. People were just, I don't think we're taking it seriously enough and looking into it. Yes, all time great pop songs. Everybody knows those congas and all that, but I almost wonder, given what you started to see in the mid '70s when the Jackson Five leave Motown after a
Right.
dispute, and they end up on Epic Records. I almost wonder if like Michael would be in the studio and they would be doing all that bass and conga shit. Michael would be like, "No, man, do it this way," and because he had
Well,
the
it's,
ears.
it's weird. It's weird. By 75, 75 is when 1975, when they left Motown, went to Epic. And that's when Michael gradually took over leadership and became the chief, writer.
Yeah,
But then ironically, he took over leadership of the group, but ironically, that's when he started to wean himself out of the group.
yeah, no, exactly. And you almost wonder because you got to remember, Michael Jackson is the guy that became friends with Paul McCartney, and then
Oh,
bought the Beatles
yeah.
songwriting publishing catalog out from underneath McCartney at auction.
Yeah.
So Michael was a fucking ruthless guy. I mean, he's
Yeah.
everybody talks about Kobe as the Black Mamba. Michael Jackson was like Michael Black Mamba times 10. He might as well have been like uh, a giant king cobra from a Japanese movie. I mean, that guy was nasty. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was plotting all this and using his brothers to get to the point where he could do his own thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so he gets on Epic, and he didn't write that much, but the stuff that was original to the group, he wrote all of that. The first record that they did was mostly produced by Gamble and Huff, which shouldn't be a surprise because between like 1974 and 1977, it seems like Gamble and Huff produced
Yeah.
half of black music.
Yeah.
For the love of money and a whole bunch of other stuff. I mean, and Love Train and TSOP and all that stuff. And so it's a very Gamble and Huff sounding record, or those first couple. But the stuff that Michael does write is probably the best stuff on those records. I mean, I always say these about the Quincy Jones records too, is that for as much as Rod Templeton was a good songwriter, the guys from Toto or uh, what's his, well, McCartney, Wonder, and a few of these pros, the best stuff on those records uniformly and without question is written by Michael. And so I'll give you an early example of this. The song "Do What You Wanna," which you listen to it and it's just very it's almost a lark from Michael, and it shows that he has an understanding of pop tradition and how smart he is. It's very teeny bopper. It's like you can snap your fingers and smile and kind of dancing man, and it almost comes from the tradition of the early black Motown singers that were out there basically doing minstrelsy for white folk.
Yeah.
Uh, but it also has a lot of the Michael trademarks. And so here you have this teeny bopper, very 50s snap doo 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 kind of song, but you get the funky, striking, creative bass line. You get that expressive near falsetto with just flawless melodic placement, and you get those vocal overdubs that Michael liked to put in there for those harmonies. Most famously, or in my mind, is "Working Day and Night." It has that kind of effect. So
That's a
you're
good song. I like that song.
yeah. Oh, that's my favorite Michael song that he wrote.
Yeah.
But so you're hearing hints of that already, and there's that pretty nasty edge. And I gotta say, for a guy who was either asexual, off drugs, or was just a natural guy, had a naturally creepy fascination with children. In other words, he was a natural born pedophile. Who knows? Or the drugs.
Which I believe. I believe he was that.
Probably, but there's also speculation. It's been written, and I don't know. It may be bullshit, but somehow Joe Jackson had him chemically castrated as a kid so that he could keep the voice. That's in the Wikipedia entry, and again, I didn't want to research that further, to be honest with you, because that would be disturbing. But he also just had this gift for translating raw male sexuality to tape. And capturing that, and it's unbelievably so. It's unbelievably so. So here, even during this Jackson's period, where they're leaning on Gamble and Huff, and they're still kind of a boy band, but they're all adults at this point, with the wide collars and the afros and all that. Michael is genius is creeping in. He's obviously the star. And I would imagine by this point the other guys are kind of starting to say, "What the fuck," And if they were jealous, I mean, who knows? Or look, Tito Jackson might have been a pretty good bassist or whatever, but I mean, come on, is like Tito going to actually be jealous of Michael? It's like, look, I'm short, I'm fat, I'm a bassist, and I'm not him. So even by that point, maybe defeat was setting in. So that's the setup, and then you get to the late '70s when Michael is in a position to say, you know what, fuck all that. I'm going to do my own. I have my own ideas. I have my own energy, and he's spending a lot of time in New York in Studio 54. He's become friends, or he's been connected with Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones is famous for basically being a bossa nova guy and a jazz guy, and a contemporary of a lot of those Rat Packers. I mean, basically, he was kind of the token black guy in the Rat Pack.
Yeah.
Like the other token black guy. Excuse me.
Sammy Davis, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, the black Jew. And then, exactly. And Quincy Jones was kind of an honorary member of that. So that's sort of what he was known for. But he also just had pop sensibilities. And so you get Quincy Jones' musical talent and ability as an arranger and a set of ears, and you put him with Michael, who is so funky. I mean, the mud is practically dripping off his butt, and you put them together in the studio, and out comes Off the Wall, which I would say, and also remember during this time too that Michael's also positioning himself as a star through movies. I mean, he does The Wiz,
which flopped.
Yeah, I mean, it flopped. You gotta give it up for them giving it a shot. And so, it's all these like black mostly musical icons plus Nipsey Russell. Go figure. And
what was Diana Ross as Dorothy and Michael as the Scarecrow?
Yeah, and it was Nipsey as the Tin Man, and I can't remember who the lion was, but assume it was a fairly big guy from the Motown tradition. Who cares? I mean, that's another research spot that can go. We'll let the listeners do the digging. So this all sets up again Off the Wall, which to me, I don't know why I do this, but I was born in September of 1975. I'm 3 weeks older than Arturo here. And I like to do this. Okay, what are the greatest albums in my lifetime? Because if you figure about it, most of the great rock and roll albums of all time that make the lists are older than us. And so I like to do this. So since 75, obviously the list gets thinner, but what's on it? In my opinion, Off the Wall may be the best popular music album made since I've been alive. It's up there. There's a short list: London Calling, Octung Baby, Nevermind, Bright in the Corners, and some others.
Off the Wall, as great an album as it is, wouldn't even be in my top 30 of since 1975.
Okay, well, for purposes of this episode, how many Prince albums would be in your top 30?
I would put maybe two, maybe two.
Yeah, hold off
Um,
on hold off on it because
yeah,
I want you to have your thunder, but
yeah.
maybe two. And me personally, I would have the one, and then one that comes pretty close. Subjectively, at least on
Mm.
my favorite list, it's in the top five. So we get to Off the Wall, and it's almost an insult to call it disco. I mean, I guess ostensibly they're working in a disco format, but it transcends disco even while capturing the disco ethos and really just blows it away. I mean, I don't think anybody had ever heard anything like it. I don't think anything like it has been made since. I think there's been a lot of attempts to capture some of the stuff, but it just hasn't gotten there. It's just a pop music tour de force. Just the beginning of the record, the beginning bass line, the little sexual pillow talk, the first ooh, I can't do it, so I'm not going to try, but the woo, okay, that's my best attempt at a Michael falsetto. But then it kicks into "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough," and you get this clipped falsetto, this extraordinary expression, and of the sentiment of the lyrics. The even his low end, which at that point is like a low end falsetto, but it's almost like barbed wire in its emotional tone, and you just get this, the strings, the bridge with that like oddly fuzzy guitar effect, and then the outro, which is just incredible with that little clapping uh, conga percussion skittering thing that goes out into the fade. Amazingly, this is not. I mean, a lot of folks are like, "This is Quincy Jones uh, doing his thing," but I've heard. Have you heard the demo
No, never
version?
heard the demo. No.
It's in spirit. It's not that far off. It's Quincy Jones and the Professionals, studio musicians, bringing it to like pure artistry and pure virtuosity. But his demo, all of the skits are there, all of the bass stuff is there. The rhythm is in place, the bones are there, the skeleton is there, the tempo is all there. So that's like Michael. He wasn't a great player, but he could play, and he knew what he wanted. And so it's interesting because in his career, Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson co-produced the records, and Quincy Jones was more of the overseer of that. But his stuff, he was in charge and telling Quincy what he needed, and he was in there basically barking orders and like telling these guys. He was a dog ears type of guy. In a lot of ways, I think he was a Brian Wilson. There's a moment in the film, and I've reviewed it a while back on one of our episodes about concert films. This is it. There's a moment in there where him and his musical director are having a conversation during rehearsal, and the musical director just outright says, "Man, you just tell me what you want because you're the only one that can hear what you want. I can't hear what you want. I don't have that ability. But if you just tell me what you need or what you're hearing, I'll get you there. But I just don't have the talent." Kind of an admission and shrugging his shoulders. And so it's kind of an extraordinary moment. So you go through this record, and one of the striking parts of it is there's a Wings cover and there's a Stevie Wonder cover. And okay, so you're thinking like, oh, geez, bringing on this, trading on goodwill of legends or whatever. But he turns the Wings song into a Michael song because of his vocals and those harmonies, and really capturing the doo-doo-doos. And then the Stevie Wonder song just has a sultriness that, yes, I mean, Stevie was capable of it, and it probably would have been more layered and had the more of the synth going on and all of that. But Michael turns it into this really sensual. Again, Michael was a master of bass line arrangements, and you get that. So it's 9 songs, in and out of disco. You get the pop song by Rod Templeton, "Rock With You," which again, has a lot of iconic stuff, great singing, and then even the ballad. My least favorite song on that record, and probably yours too, is "She's Out of My Life." But you do have to give it up for the vocal take. Like he's literally like, man, he really is missing that. Oh man, he wants that chick back, and he's just remembering everything, and he's practically crying. And so it's a really compelling vocal performance of a really garbage song.
Yeah, he was probably imagining a little 8-year-old girl. Well, actually, maybe a boy, because he was into little boys. That's probably what he was imagining when he was in the studio in the vocal booth.
Man, we are going to get in so much trouble here. But yeah, I mean, the scary part is that may actually be valid. But here we have, like I said, 9 songs, economy, really creative. I mentioned before, "Working Day and Night" is probably my favorite Michael song because, man, what a funky song. And that's where Quincy Jones was able to meld with Michael, putting in that little horn arrangements on the bridge with the skittering. Again, these sort of like really, sort of unique Michael rhythms. Okay, Bo Diddley had his rhythm, Johnny Cash had his rhythm, and Michael had his rhythm. And
so did Prince.
Yes, and so did Prince. And that's the thing. So they all had that distinct. But man, Michael Jackson, you just know like his beat, and he's got just lots of forms of it. "Smooth Criminal" is an example. "Wanna Be Starting Something." There's this. He just has this skitter in his mind, and he could just control that skitter just in a genius way. So I'm extremely complimentary of "Off the Wall." Again, he becomes sex symbol. He becomes superstar at this point. He sweeps up at the Grammys in 1980, and so he's on his way. And the scary part is for like 99% of the universe, "Off the Wall" would be the peak. Artistic accomplishment, pop accomplishment, sales accomplishment. It's many times platinum itself. I don't think it ever reached diamond, but it got way up there.
It did, yeah. I mean, here's the thing. It says something about the guy's ambition. It went 9 times platinum in the U.S., 6 times platinum in the U.K., platinum in a bunch of other countries. He had 2 #1 singles in the Billboard pop charts. The first 2 songs on the album. He had 2 #1 hit singles, not just in R&B, but in the pop charts. And Michael Jackson still thought the album undersold and underperformed.
Yeah. Well, it's not so much. Yeah. He thought it undersold. He had that much pride and that much confidence in his ability. And, but he also was like, "Oh, I can do better." And I'm like, are you fucking kidding? It's like you make one of the great albums of all time and one of the most important albums of all time. And it's like, okay, I can do better than that.
On this episode, we finally got around to the first series installment of our eternal debate between the greatness of Prince and the supposed greatness of Michael Jackson. For the next episode, there won't be much of a debate as to the overall craptastic nature of the bands we're about to talk about. A few weeks ago, we did an episode called Death by Nirvana, in which Chris and I did a grisly body count of all the bands whose careers were either drastically altered forever or just destroyed by the alt-rock revolution and carnage that Nirvana wrought. As a follow-up to that, our next episode will scour the rock landscape from the mid-1990s to the early 2000s for all the terrible bands that came in Nirvana's wake and put the worst of all connotations to the words alternative and grunge. It wasn't just Nirvana that inspired this milieu of mediocrity, however. Some of these bands spent significant amounts of record label money doing bastardized, corny, watered-down versions of Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains as well. Were these bands bad enough to make us yearn for the days of glamorous, hairspray-soaked ass rock? Not really, but they were pretty shitty nonetheless. Join us on the next episode of the Curmudgeon Rock Report as we get our hands dirty and eviscerate the grunge and alt-rock wannabes known as the dregs of Nirvana. Email us at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com or hit us on Twitter at curmudgeonpod.
Now, for for our early stage Prince apologism, Arturo, tell us about Prince.
All right. This is Prince from 1975 into 1981. Throughout the course of this Prince versus Michael series, and I think I speak for you as well, Chris, I really don't want to delve too much into biography, although I will in some spots, but not too much. This comparative exercise is about, first and foremost, these guys' music, its greatness, or at least its high and low points, its influence, and how it, along with these dudes' iconography, defined an era and influenced multiple generations of musicians and artists. The baby boom, like you said earlier, the baby boomers had the Beatles and the Stones. Gen X and Y had Prince and Michael Jackson.
Indeed.
And there's a reason why Prince's name comes up first. And I'm going to explain why.
Okay. I just thought it sounded better than Michael versus Prince.
No,
it's better branding.
Better branding and just overall better artistry. Now, that being said, here's a brief overview of Mr. Rogers Nelson's career.
Prince Rogers Nelson.
Prince Rogers Nelson, from its nascency up to the twin towers of Dirty Mind and Controversy, where Prince became Prince, capital letters.
Is nascency a word?
I believe it is. Yes. Nascent is the adjective. Nascency is the noun.
Okay, I got to look this up. I've never heard nascency. I've heard infancy, but not nascency. So anyway, yeah, but you're the English teacher.
That's right. All right. Well, Prince got his foot into the Minneapolis RnB music scene in 1975 at the age of 17, when his cousin's husband, Pepe Willie, great name, formed the band 94 East. And while he wasn't officially a member of the band, even at this young age, Prince contributed guitar parts to many of their recordings, and he co-wrote several songs. A local producer named Chris Moon helped Prince record a demo in 1976 that got no traction. Moon then passed Prince on to a local businessman named Owen Husney, who signed Prince to a management contract in 1977 and funded another demo recording at Minneapolis's legendary recording studio, Studio 80. The second time was the charm, as Prince attracted major label attention and eventually signed with Warner Brothers. On to Southern California went the young Mr. Nelson, where he wrote, produced, arranged, and played every single instrument on the debut album For You, released in 1978.
Which is a pretty good record, but it's a precursor. I mean, it's starter kit Prince.
It really is.
And maybe I always wondered if like that was like A&R shackles and chains.
Kind of, because it was an album that not only was very much of its time, but of its place. It was definitely in tune with the synth-toned, that R&B soft funk pop sound of Minneapolis circa late 1970s, evoking contemporary bands and acts such as Aura and Cohesion. I guarantee you this is the only podcast where the Minneapolis bands Aura and Cohesion will be name-checked.
Yes, I was gonna say this is when we talk about Prince's influences. They literally do off the grid.
Yeah, and the album sold okay, nothing special, especially considering how much money Warner Brothers spent on the recording. Nevertheless, like you said, Chris, you can hear the germinations of the future Prince sound with his sharp ear for arrangements, crisp sound, and badass guitar playing. A lot of really like badass guitar playing on this album, more so than on the next one. Prince finally made noise and became an R&B soul star in 1979 with the release of his follow-up album simply titled Prince in fall of that year. The album hit number 4 on the Billboard R&B charts thanks to the success of his first big hit, the infectious I Wanna Be Your Lover, which topped the R&B singles charts and went as high as number 11 on the Billboard pop charts.
Yeah, great song.
Yeah, great song. The whole country finally got a chance to see what this little pint-sized dynamo looked like when he made his first ever national TV appearance on Dick Clark's American Bandstand in January of 1980.
Now this is one thing that I'll interject on this. I can just imagine, because we were kids, and so we didn't have this experience, but you can imagine being an adult and actually seeing a late teen, or well, actually early teen Michael Jackson or Prince on television for the first time.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what in the world is this? Even if you hated it, you had to kind of be jaw dropped. And I'll let you explain this Dick Clark appearance because it's hilarious. But
no, go, you explain it. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, essentially, it's Prince doing Prince's shtick, where he goes out there, does the performance, but for most, Dick Clark tries to interview him, and Prince maybe said about 4 words the entire time. I think at one time, they say Prince Dick Clark asks him a question, and his answer is just flashing like 4 fingers to the camera, and then just kind of having this like distant, maybe not stoned look, but that classic like Prince look that everybody goofs on. That sort of 1,000-yard stare with the come hither.
I don't think it was shyness either. I think that was very much Prince creating his persona.
Yeah, he was fucking. Yeah, Prince always knew what he was doing. He was fucking around.
Yeah. And he was a smart dude.
Yeah.
He knew what he was building a mythology and building what's the word I'm looking for?
He's been mythology, but he was also kind of he's building a persona.
An aura, a mystique about him.
Yeah, he had the mystique and the aura, and he had a sense of humor. Like you hear all these stories about him, and he just had this. He had the swagger of a basketball player, and obviously the Chappelle bit, but he just. I don't know. He was a shit talker and he almost like a prankster. It was almost like a put on. So anyway,
yeah. Well, anyway, this album again. Produced, arranged, performed, written solely by Prince. Unlike Michael, he doesn't need help. Here is where he graduates from Minneapolis and starts to flaunt his patented sound and style. Sharp songwriting, indelible pop hooks, funk grooves that remain sharp despite the disco gloss, love ballads that manage to avoid banality, guitar virtuosity, increasingly sexualized and saucy, racy lyrics, and eclecticism and song style that predicts a mastery of versatility. All the ingredients and hallmarks of future greatness are all audible on this album. However, all this pales in comparison to the gigantic leap he would make on his next album.
Yeah, more than a gigantic leap. It's like a intergalactic leap, which is not saying that the self-titled. I mean, that's like an underappreciated masterpiece. One thing I will say, by the way, Michael didn't really need help. If you've heard those demos, he just wanted it, and it made him that much better. But be that as it may, no, he wasn't he wasn't Quincy Jones, but he could have done his own thing. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, Prince was Quincy Jones and Michael Jackson wrapped up in one. Now,
that's a fair statement.
Recorded rather quickly between May and June of 1980 in Prince's home studio and released in October of that year, the music that would make up the album Dirty Mind had an odd, minimalist, almost demo quality. And this was the first indication that Prince was cooking up something that was not only a total departure from what his Minneapolis scene peers were doing, but also different from what anyone in R&B, soul, and funk was doing at the time, including Michael Jackson. The second indication of Dirty Mind's otherness was its unique, visionary blend of danceable raw funk, new wavy electro rhythms, and impeccable hooky pop songwriting. Other artists in the world of R&B and soul came close to this kind of concoction, most notably George Clinton and Rick James. But none of them did it with the directness, the clarity, and the immediate freshness that Prince brought to the table.
On Dirty Mind, here's one of the most interesting things about it, what makes it so extraordinary. The best songs on it, in my opinion, are the title track, which has this unbelievably minimal electronic drum part with this little keyboard loop, mixed in with that falsetto and the teenage lust going on, and then Head, which come on, use your imagination. We know what that song's about, and that's what at the time everybody was fixated on. It wasn't the music; it was the all the oral and anal sex, or whatever you want to say, allusions to it. So those are the best songs. Biggest hit on it was made famous by Cyndi Lauper. When You Were Mine. Which it's might as well be the Go-Go's and it's girl groups and just kind of invented it's weird. It's R&B mixed with almost like a surfy, like Beach Boys kind of thing. It's like it's like this California pop tune is like filtered through the songsters of the mid 70s, like kind of the black songsters of the 70s. So it's phenomenal. But I just always like to mention that Cyndi, most people, when they, if they say, well, what can you tell me about Dirty Mind? You remember Cyndi Lauper's When You Were Mine? Oh yeah, that it originated there. So it's just kind of always been funny to me, but do continue.
Yes. Well, like I said, first indication that Dirty Mind is some other something from another planet. You have the sound of the record, you have the song, the really amazing songwriting, and the genre versatility. The third indication, Chris, as you said, was its lyrical content. Now, even back in 1980, racy lyrics weren't new in so-called black music. Prince, however, upped the ante with songs blatantly describing, and in some cases glorifying, oral sex, like in Head, like you mentioned, threesomes, incest, like in the song Sister, and Prince did have an older sister. I wonder, makes you wonder if like this is actually biography,
Yeah, seriously, is this autobiography? And then, and then you've got Downtown, which almost makes me wonder if that's about the gay scene down there,
I'm going to get to Downtown in a moment. All right. I'm going to get there. It's not about the gay scene. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Okay.
Anyway, the that unabashed, salacious sexuality of the lyrics were really standard setting for its time. And it kind of paved the way for the much more frank sexual content in pop music for years to come, right? Now, all of these aspects were enough to make Dirty Mind a revolutionary album, but it was Prince's image at the time that put everything over the top. This early 1980s period saw Prince take the stage, as reflected in the album cover for Dirty Mind, wearing bikini briefs, high heels, an open trench coat, and nothing else. He was boldly and proudly sexy. He was androgynous. He was irresistible to women. He was intimidating to aspiring Casanovas. And overall, he was a dangerous threat to the straight male patriarchal view of what masculinity was.
Yeah, and in a way, he's my hero, because what was he officially listed at? 5'2"?
5'3", maybe.
Which is
he
probably
was a short dude.
Which was probably bullshit. He was probably more like 5'0", 5'1", But he's one of these guys. Yeah, who cares if I'm this short? I'm a sexy motherfucker, as he would say in 1993.
Yeah, 92 actually. Yeah.
Well, okay. Became famous in 93.
Sexy motherfucker.
Pick the niche. Pick the niche.
Anyway, the innovative music, the funk, the musicianship, the songwriting, the lyrics, the looks, the sexuality, the badass element of danger to conventional society. Prince had it all, and even more so than literally any of his R&B, soul, funk peers, including Michael Jackson, and Michael Jackson fucking knew it too. All right. The album Dirty Mind peaked modestly at number 45 on the Billboard pop charts and number 7 on the R&B charts, but it received rave critical reviews that described it as a seminal musical moment at the beginning of the decade, which is exactly what it was. The lead single, Uptown, the one you mentioned, Chris, was not only an R&B dance floor smash, peaking at number 5 in the R&B charts, but it was Prince's first foray into socio-political commentary. If you listen to the words, the Uptown mentioned in the song can be interpreted as not just a place to party and meet girls. It's a metaphor for the panacea that humanity should aspire to. It's a place that's free of racism and prejudice, and it's actually pretty explicit if you read the words. The
Yeah,
racism
absolutely.
and the prejudice is there. It's kind of like Curtis Mayfield's "People Get Ready" with more sex and more funk.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah, that's a pretty good descriptor. Oh, by the way, for what it's worth, you can tell I'm Team Michael because in my mind, Uptown became Downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got to call myself out on that. Anyway.
Anyway, Prince followed up the landmark Dirty Mind with Controversy in 1981, which at first listen seemed like Dirty Mind Part 2. However, dig into the album and you'll find some of the best songs of this early period of Prince's. The title track is a savage funk jam that manages to have the most blissfully beautiful pop chorus imaginable. Controversy, the song, hit number 3 on the R&B charts and number 70 in the pop charts. The album, Controversy, also has the dance floor cracker Let's Work. It's got more righteous political commentary, this time about the Cold War. Ronnie talked to Russia, obviously about Ronald Reagan and his feud with the Soviet Union, and a continuation of Dirty Mind's seething sexuality with the wonderfully and blissfully titled Jack You Off. The album hit number 3 on the R&B charts and, more importantly, went all the way to number 21 on the Billboard album charts. This led to a slot opening for the Rolling Stones on the U.S. leg of the Tattoo You tour. This, of course, would be the precursor to the massive mainstream breakthrough that Prince would achieve in the next few years, establishing him as one of the premier pop stars of the decade and one of its most important musical figures as well. One important thing to notice about the Prince opening for the Stones, when he opened for them in Los Angeles, he was not received well by Rolling Stones fans. He was wearing his trench coat, bikini briefs, high heels outfit.
Yeah, I think at that point that must have been a great show to be a fly on the wall on.
Yeah. He got booed on. He got booed off the stage. Stuff was thrown onto the stage. Prince and his band had to leave the stage. And then the promoter for the show,
Bill Graham,
yes. Bill Graham had to go on stage and castigate the audience for booing Prince, saying, "You people, you're going to be paying good money to see this guy in the next few years." And he was right.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway.
And that's a good segue into what we'll be talking about in his 80s. So that's a good setup.
Yeah.
Hey,
but I'm not done yet.
You're not done yet. You're not done.
No. Not to finalize all this and to bring this all in comparison to Michael Jackson. Before I talked about the sexuality, Prince's seething sexuality, Michael Jackson had that too, for sure. He definitely did. But Prince was the real deal when it came to that.
Oh, absolutely. Which
it oozed out of that dude without even talking.
Oh yeah, I mean, but I would make this as a defense of Michael as an artist. The fact that he could bullshit that so convincingly and became such a sex symbol. And look, I mean, even like going into the late '80s and all that. I mean, Michael kept that up. I mean, he made some of the best love songs and the best sexual songs in the history of rock and roll. Even though, Brooke Shields was clearly a beard, Madonna was a beard, but yeah, I mean, Prince. I mean, like the list of singers and models and notable celebrity and culturally interesting females that guy fucked is probably what, about as long as the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Michael Jackson made teenage girls scream. Prince made teenage girls come in their pants, and he made adult women want to fuck him. That's the difference.
And they did. I said,
And they did
Michael made him scream in the audience. Prince made him scream in private.
in the bedroom. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
yeah, and that's the thing. So Prince versus Michael. Yeah, it's those periods are just extraordinary. So
yeah,
promo.
and to bring some conclusion,
Go ahead.
let me just say that Michael's Off the Wall is a great record. It's a fantastic disco funk album, in fact. But it's a disco funk album. And disco funk albums were a dime a dozen during the late 1970s. Hell, I think Parliament's album of that same year as Off the Wall, Golly Holla Stupid, is every bit as good as Jackson's album. Chic, Sister Sledge, Donna Summer, Kool and the Gang, they all put out disco funk jams that rivaled what Michael Jackson was doing. With Dirty Mind, and to a lesser extent, Controversy, however, Prince was reinventing R&B. He was creating a new language for funk and soul music that had never been heard before. I've always felt that the two pop music figures most responsible for inventing the 1980s were David Bowie, especially for all that visionary work he did during his Berlin era, and Prince. At this point, yes, Michael was the bigger pop star, and he would remain so for the next 6 or 7 years. But musically, artistically, and more importantly, influentially, in my opinion, the decade would eventually belong to Prince. The groundbreaking, visionary, and innovative albums, Dirty Mind and Controversy, were the first two shots fired in that direction.
And here's how I would respond to what you just said. There's actually three guys that defined the tenor, shape, and sound of the '80s: Prince, David Bowie, and Michael Jackson. I will say this: I think that Michael, because he got R&B onto MTV, obviously defined the look and feel. I mean, come on, even 5 or 6 years later, you get like Orange Juice Jones and those guys, the Johnny Gill and all those, and they're basically doing cheap Michael impersonations, at least musically. But I also think that yes, was Off the Wall influenced by Chic and by some of those artists from the mid '70s, no doubt. But Michael took it further. He put the Michael rhythm in it. He put the Michael chop falsetto in it. And he took it and he created a new kind of pop music out of it. And, obviously, it's become a cultural cliche these days and meme, but it really was kind of Michael saying, oh, yeah, hold my beer. So that's it. And it really did kind of set up the '80s. And I would say, look, Michael and Prince.
I disagree with Off the Wall setting up the '80s. I think Off the Wall, as great as it is very much of its time. It's great, it's brilliant, and it's better than most of those bands and artists that influenced Off the Wall. I agree. But I think what Prince did was more visionary, more just out of the fucking blue, inventive, that nothing's ever been heard before like this.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, Michael, it's half and half. I mean, I'll agree with you on that. And so you make a point that undoubtedly, and it's inarguable, that Off the Wall is the punctuation to the '70s.
Sure.
It's definitely the period or the exclamation point or even the question mark to that era of black music and dance hall music, or disco music. But I think it does set up the '80s, like, with Don't Stop Till You Get, and like Rock With You. I mean, come on. I mean, that sets up the 80s R&B smooth man ballad thing to the nth. I mean, look, I mean, half the songs Bobby Brown did might as well have been Rock With You Part 1 or 1.5, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5. You know, George Foreman named all his kids George. Bobby Brown like ripped off Rock With You about 19 times. But here's a common thread for what it's worth. And uh, just a real quick thing. The common thread that runs through David Bowie, Prince, and Michael Jackson is Nile Rodgers in
Yeah.
terms of influence. And in at least Bowie's case, I mean, Rodgers came in and produced Let's Dance, and so actually defined that. And actually, Bowie owes most of the money he died with in his estate to Nile Rodgers for what it's worth. I mean, that money that was by far his most successful record. So yeah, I mean, look, and that just speaks to the genius of Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards. I mean, they were paradigm shifters, and as producers and musicians, these guys as artists and musicians, they took it that much further. But I see Michael Jackson and Prince as just working in parallel. As we've said, they have parallel lives, but even artistic influence, those guys really for black music or black male music in the 80s and into the 90s were kind of the plus and minus to the battery. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. I think Prince's influence leaned more toward the hardcore.
Yeah, no, it did.
He was a George Clinton Funkadelic fan. I can't imagine Michael really getting into P-Funk that much.
Yeah, not that much. Yeah, I mean, clearly, yeah, but you know, there's more Curtis Mayfield in Prince. There's definitely more Donny Hathaway,
Sly Stone.
Yeah, but the thing with Michael clearly, Marvin Gaye is a huge influence on Michael too, in terms of
and Stevie Wonder.
Yeah, and Stevie Wonder, like basically the Motown peers or the guys that he basically came up with there in the late 60s and 70s. So there's clear influences there. Which again, it kind of makes our argument, or my argument, is that these two really kind of are the panorama of black music, basically from 1970 all the way to like 1989, 90, when Teddy Riley and hip hop took over. But it's pretty fascinating. And then with Prince, I think Michael Jackson had the crossover appeal, but Prince really had more legs with white folk. That think about by the 90s, the thing that's keeping him going are his sort of white enthusiasts, not punk guys, but almost guys like you that appreciate the guitar work, that the virtuoso, and then tape traders. And like I said, he had with Diamonds and Pearls was a huge R&B hit. And
I always felt that in the U.S. because Michael Jackson in his older years was way more popular in Europe and than in the U.S. And that's Michael's white audience.
Yeah.
Whereas Prince, I think in the U.S. maintained his black audience, but his black audience in the U.S. were like the neo soul types.
Yeah, the Smart Brothers and the brothers that smoked a shitload of weed. Yeah, Maxwell.
Right. Yeah, those were Prince's black audience fans, and people who were into hip hop and stuff like that. Those were his fans, and yeah, he did have his white fans, but his white fans became more like the music geek white boys.
Yeah, exactly, like the tape traders and all that. And I think what we're really trying to say was that Prince's music gravitated more towards the collegiate. I think that's, even though, I mean, I'm an exception. And again, I think that most of the folks out there probably side with Arturo at this point. I think that part of that is just Prince's sheer volume and the fact that he never quite went away until he died. Whereas Michael had faded. I mean, the last 10 years of his career, he was pretty much a pariah. But yeah, that's really what it is that Prince gravitated more towards the collegiate, whereas Michael was sort of a man of the people and kind of stayed that way. Again, until
we'll get more into this in future episodes of this series.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's end it here in 1981. Michael is germinating Thriller, and Prince is planning 1999.
Okay, so after that spirited and wondrous talk of Prince versus Michael, now we go into our deepest, darkest, weirdest corners of our crates in the vault, as we call it. And so, Arturo, what is your album of the week coming out of your vault?
One of my favorites of the punk era. When people think of New York City CBGB's club scene of the 1970s and all the punk and new wave music that it spawned, what bands or artists come to mind? You have Patti Smith, the punk poetess and goddess. You have the Ramones, who are the punk originators. You have Blondie, that sexy attitude drenched pop rock. You have Television and their innovative guitar tapestries. You have the even more innovative reinvention of the pop song idiom and exploration of African rhythms and textures that Talking Heads became legendary for. However, one band that eventually gets lost in the NYC punk name check shuffle is Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and in particular their seminal and influential 1977 debut album, Blank Generation. Now, born and raised in Kentucky, Richard Myers, his real name, he dropped out of high school at the age of 17 in 1966 and moved to New York City, immersing himself in the arts and music scene. After spending numerous years living the decadent bohemian life that makes me wish I could get in a time machine and travel to late 60s, early 70s New York just so I can check out the underground art scene at the time, he spent time in an interesting proto-punk band from 72 to 74 called the Neon Boys. The song Love Comes in Spurts, the opening track from Blank Generation, was originally one of only 4 songs that the Neon Boys recorded in their lifetime. Another member of the Neon Boys was Tom Miller, an old friend of Richard's from the time they spent in a boarding school in Delaware when they were teenagers. After the Neon Boys broke up, Miller formed a new band called Television, changed his name to Tom Verlaine, and added Richard as bassist. And it was at this time that Richard changed his name to Richard Hell. This 1974 to 75 period that Hell was in Television was crucial in the history of punk rock imagery and iconography. Hell was by far the band's most physically active member on stage, and his energetic, now cliche, pogo hopping stage presence was augmented by his unique look. He sported spiky hair, he had ripped jeans, and torn shirts held together by safety pins. This fashion sense was not lost upon Malcolm McLaren, the British talent manager and music business impresario who would often travel to New York during this time to check out new trends and ideas for his clothing boutique Sex, which had recently opened in London. Anyone with a decent knowledge of rock history knows that McLaren was the mastermind behind the Sex Pistols. Within a year, Johnny Rotten would be sporting the same look Hell originated. While upset at first that his look was blatantly ripped off, over the years, Hell became more at ease with the fashion theft, expressing that quote-unquote ideas are free property. Eventually, Hell left Television due to tensions with Verlaine. I think Hell's increasing visual popularity with the band was a rumored reason. And then Hell joined Johnny Thunders very briefly with the Heartbreakers in 1975. That didn't last long, and in 76, he finally formed his own band, putting his name in front and christening the band the Voidoids. They released the 3-song Blank Generation EP later that year on independent label Orc Records. It became an underground hit, and the serious word-of-mouth praise landed them a deal with Sire Records, which also had Talking Heads. The music on the album that followed was revelatory to say the least. Coiled, angular riffs mixed with unpredictable, winding twin guitar leads and off-kilter, signature-changing jazzy rhythms that produced a sound akin to like television on cocaine. It's basically what the Voidoids sounded like. It was like a more aggressive, uppity version of television, and with a better sense of humor too. Hell's lyrics made nihilism and disaffection cool before the 1990s drove those sentiments into the ground with an overdose of irony. Misanthropic about his place in the world around him, as in the title track Blank Generation, misanthropic about romantic relationships, as in the songs Love Comes in Spurts and Betrayal Takes Two, and misanthropic about the whole music scene in general, as in Down at the Rock and Roll Club. Hell never fails to deliver existential angst with his tongue firmly in his cheek. Of course, this is what saves the music from being a one dimensional downer. Hell being bemused by the shittiness of the world rather than being depressed by it is actually oddly uplifting and empowering. However, it's no more empowering than the genuinely odd and original music that would influence other bands in the ensuing years to make pop friendly, streamlined versions of this sound and call it new wave. It isn't hard to imagine Rick Ocasek and the Cars making frequent trips down to New York from Boston in the period of 1975 to 77 to see what the CBGB's bands were doing. And it's even easier to see the direct line of influence from the Voidoids to bands such as the Cars, the Knack, and the Buzzcocks. Unfortunately, Hell was a heroin junkie, and it killed any forward momentum the band had. It took them 5 years to release a follow up album in 1982, but by then they were no longer in the vanguard of rock as punk mutated into the safer brand known as New Wave, and the album was widely panned. Fortunately, Hell's heart truly lay in the written word. After getting off both heroin and the rock and roll train, he devoted the rest of his life to a literary career that spanned poetry, essays, short stories, memoirs, journals, and novels, while occasionally getting back with the Voidoids on occasion to play some shows. In the end, though, Blank Generation and the band that produced it belong in that canon of one album wonders who were so great it didn't really matter what else they did afterward. So if anybody wants to get a good listen in to what, the classic New York CBGB sound, go check out Hell and the Voidoids and their one great album, Blank Generation.
So yeah, I agree that this album should be minted as a testament, and a towering testament at that, to this era of New Yorkish music, and good call in terms of that influence on those sort of quirky rhythms that came a few years later from the Cars and the Knack and all of that. I will say this, and one final thought, and we'll just keep it very, very short and pointed. How tortured does one have to be to change their performance name to Hell? That just kind of says it all. Like you said, with the spiky hair and the jeans and all that, and the heroin habit and all that. Yeah, there was not a whole lot of sunny side going on there personally. So yeah, my name is Chris Hell, and your name is Arturo. Fuck off. It's one of the great. This is one of the reasons I love rock and roll. And I know we were just talking about mythology with Prince, but mythos. If it wasn't for mythos, rock and roll wouldn't be rock and roll. Remember, dumb is not the same thing as bad. So most folks my age may have heard and have probably seen uh, a small little art film called Pulp Fiction.
Mm.
One of the great memories, and I'm sure, Arturo, uh, if there's, well, let me quiz you, and you'll probably not give the answer that I'm looking for. But when you think of Pulp Fiction, what's the scene that immediately first comes to mind?
Uh, Uma Thurman overdosing and getting the shot of adrenaline in her chest.
Okay, well, what's second? And
Uh,
don't say the gimp. No, okay. Well, anyway, so I think most people,
Ving Rhames getting fucked in the ass. I mean,
yeah, exactly. But I think a lot of people, the most iconic moment of that film, it's in the middle of a sequence where the hitman Vincent Vega and uh, Marcellus Wallace's wife are having their date at the 1950s vintage restaurant club. And at one point, Uma tells Vega, or Uma Thurman's the actress, John Travolta is the Vincent Vega actress. She tells him that she needs to go, quote unquote, powder her nose at the bathroom, in the bathroom. And so she's walking away, and you get this wonderful POV shot of Uma Thurman walking very sexily in slow motion, accentuating her curves and tallness. And the backup track is Link Wray's Rumble, which is perfect. Uh, it's the emotion that scene needs. It's the sexuality. It's the mystery. It's the uh, is this really a good idea to be staring at this coked out wife of a hitman? It's immediately an iconic scene and an iconic uh, use of music in movies. However, that song had been iconic for 35 years before that, because while Dick Dale and a few others get more, Richie Valens, I guess, could count on this, this sort of surfish uh, rockabilly with fuzz and amps thing uh, was becoming more popular in the 50s and 60s. Well, Link Wray, probably most famous for a swinging surf rock cover of the Batman theme, but Rumble, singular rhythm, very snaky, very slinky, and he had this signature guitar sound, very echoey, very reverby, and just like just a beast or like a lizard hanging out in the bushes. Very exotic, very sexy, and just became iconic. And Link Wray is one of the great lost, I guess you could say. And there's a cult around him, but he's one of the great lost talents in history. However, that's not the period that I'm going to focus on, and that's not the Link Wray I'm going to talk about. So Link, he's a California guy and never made a whole lot of money and was probably troubled. And so early 70s, remember, he's a California type. And so he had a lot to say in his soul, or he was taking some good drugs, probably both. And so in
yeah.
1971, he does one of what I think is one of the most striking reinventions in pop history. He comes out with his self-titled record, Link Wray. And over the course of this album, he shows himself to have a folky soul, but also he has this almost odd psychedelic, I guess you could call it, or mentally gymnastic, eccentric gospel to him. It's got this another distinctive beat, but it's more like a clap, thump, sort of almost like back porch folk kind of thing going on. But there is some of that fuzz guitar, but it's faster and it's groovier and it's more in the vein of a lead soloist. It's almost like kind of a Neil Youngish type of thing going on. There's a lot of acoustic, just prodigious, masterful acoustic picking, and there's a lot of religious and Christian imagery on here, some of which is profound, some of which is goofy. And let me give you an indication of the divide there. So I think my favorite track on this, and according to Spotify, it's the most popular track with over 6 million downloads, is Fire and Brimstone. And it's got this almost acoustic boogie-ish thing to it. But again, with that back porch kind of, clap, thump, boom, thump beat to it. But like wonderfully folky, acoustic, almost bluesy guitar line. And it's really it's a sincere invocation of God. Now, say what you want. I mean, he's probably high as hell, and he's a Shawnee, from a Native American from North Carolina. So there's a spiritualness there, but there's imagery of God's thunder and earthquake abilities from above and below. Can't help think of Acts 1 and Acts 4 for all you folks that actually know the Bible out there. And it's really profound and fun and weird. I mean, it's a weird sound. On the other extreme is his song Ice People, which is a little faster, same kind of thing, almost like a quasi gospel thing, but it's just it's delectably ridiculous. And maybe when I first heard this record, you could think musically maybe it's got cousins such as Harry Nilsson or sort of other LA pre Fleetwood Mac peers and influences. But then you hear this and it's like Link, he's one of these eccentric geniuses. All eccentric geniuses are out of their mind in their own particular way. And I think once I read this, you'll get a sense of like his version of being out of his mind. So Ice People, here's the lyric. They're just made of ice. They don't treat their fellow man very nice. You wear your hair long, as Jesus did. They'll crucify you. You're not part of the establishment. You stand up for your rights. They call you a fool if you don't go to war. You're not living by the golden rule. Ice people. They're just made of ice. They don't treat their fellow man very nice. The red man lives and dies on the reservation, and the black man just lives anywhere he can. And the poor white man, he doesn't live any better. He can't say I'm red, I'm black, I'm yellow, I'm tanned. We're all caught up together, like the buffalo on the plains. We're just shooting sport for ice people. We're just a game. Ice people. They're made of ice. They don't treat their fellow man very nice. Ice people. They just made of ice. No, they don't treat their fellow man very nice, and so on and so on and so on until it goes out.
So who are the ice people? Just a corporate white guys?
Yeah, basically it's the it's the man. Whatever the man would have been in the 70s. Think of the
ruling elite corporate superclass.
Yeah, they're the ones sending us to sending us to war. Now that was done much more elegantly by lots of artists and lot more profoundly, Fortunate Son or whatever you want to say. But yeah, that's just a very hippy dippy. That's almost like if Angela Davis was writing second grade curriculums. Or like first grade curriculums. It's like take Dr. Seuss and Angela Davis, put them together, and that might be what they came up with for first graders in 1971. And so it's spectacularly goofy. And one last thought about McRae, and again, it's a great album. It's worth checking out. This is a guy who took one singular beat, abandoned it, and created another singular beat. I mean, that's one of the themes of this episode is these singular beats, but the fact that this guy was bright enough to tear his up and create another one puts him on a level as Prince, because Prince did that at least 3 times in his career. But the cover, and I'll leave it at this, and this is indicative of an old joke between Arturo and I. He makes it very clear that he's Native American on the cover. Side profile with the long hair and the sort of the skinny headband thing. He's not in the woods, which makes him unique during this period from 67 to 72, where all these folkies, they really wanted you to know they like nature and that they lived in cabins in the woods and, like Bob Dylan chilling with his Indian tribe. just John Wesley Harding.
Van Morrison, George Harrison.
Yeah.
Van Morrison like 3 times.
Yeah,
He has 3 album covers of him in the woods.
Oh yeah, Fairport Convention. You know, all yeah. Even Led Zeppelin had the guy with the sticks. You know, so and in 1971. So I found humor in that. But no, Link Wray, man was a genius. His surf rock stuff is absolutely essential. Check out. There's a singles collection from 1970 or 1960, which is Link Wray and his Raymen, which is a compilation of all the stuff they were doing in the late 50s and very early 60s. That's essential. But check out this record because it's a curveball and it's very much of 1971 California. And honestly, I think it's one of the better albums of that era from there.
You know you're gonna lose your man. All right, mama. You know I'm every day. So let's get on with it, baby. We can do it all night long. Jukebox mama, you're driving me mad.
And with that, we exit the vault and we come to the end of this episode. Very exciting. This is going to be an ongoing series of these Prince versus Michael episodes. We're tracking it chronologically, and we hope that we bring ourselves enough into it to mix the subjective and the objective, and that you love it. We think it's our version of the strongman hitting the thing at the carnival and dinging the bell. This is us at our finest. The Curmudgeon Rock Report will keep on rocking if you do. Catch us where you catch all the podcasts. We know you love rock and roll as much as we do. Support us with donations at patreon.com/curmudgeonrock. Find show notes and more on our Medium site. Join us next time as rock nerds smack you with knowledge. Stay rude, stay crude, stay sophisticated. Thank you for listening.